Halloween came early, boys and girls. In this video, I'm building a vignette around this guy. As a matter of fact, I didn't intend this video for Halloween, but it's right around the corner and the final result will fit the occasion, so have at it. So for this build, I'll be needing one tree. In order to make an armature for it, I twisted some armature wire with the help of my cordless drill. Once I had enough thickness, I started working on its roots and the branches. After it could stand on its roots, I started working on bulking it up. For this, I utilized Das air drying clay. It's actually kinda hard to work with this way. Retrospectively speaking, I should have covered the tree trunks with foil or something so the clay would hold on better. The armature wire, no matter how thick it is, doesn't have enough surface for the clay to hold on to. Anyway, so I tried to cover up all the wire with the clay with as few gaps as possible, without paying much attention to detail. All I needed at this point was coverage. Details will be done later with Dremel bits. Before I left this to dry overnight, I gave some rough lines and a tree hole so it looks more organic and more aged. Next morning I sanded off the excess sections, unnecessary sticking bits and so on with the Dremel sanding bits. After that, in order to create greater texture, I applied baking soda all over it with the help of CA glue. This will make carving bark details harder later on, but definitely helps with paint. With two different carving bits, I carved vertical lines to help imitate bark details. If I didn't have the Dremel option, I would have to be much delicate from the start with the clay covering, and would have to give all the necessary crevice details before the clay hardened, which would make this a sculpted tree, whereas this is not. Once I was done, I pegged it with a toothpick. Then started on the paint job with priming it in black. For the base coat, I mixed up a random reddish tone of brown and applied it over two coats. Then I applied a mixture of medium flesh tone and cork brown with a semi-dry brush. Then dry brushed a mixture of green brown, black red and white all over it. Finally, I applied a heavily watered down mixture of black and black red as a wash. Once the trunk is completely painted and dried, I started working on attaching its canopy. I had these green polyester bits I made a while ago and used them for this as usual. I'll make a tutorial video about this soon, so if you want to know how it's done, either wait for the next tutorial video or visit my Snowy Howitzer diorama build in which I made these. Once I had a logical canopy coverage, I applied my homemade flock with the help of hairspray. Again, I made enough videos where I show how I make these trees. I think I'll make a tutorial video for making trees this way and stop including the tree process in the future videos. Before I was done with this, I added yellowish and burgundy-like color flocks over the green ones to make it look more appealing and somewhat more realistic. Next order of business was to make a base for this. I found this pallet block in my wooden bits bin and found it to be just the right size to fit everything over it. It was way too rugged, so I sanded it down a bit. I decided to cover the surface with the same clay. In order for the clay to stick better, I sprayed water on the surfaces. The reason I covered it up with the clay is that I wanted the sides not to look plain and boring and wanted to add some details all over them. So with my terrible sculpting skills, I started carving random size and shaped skulls and some spine-like bones on all the sides. I'm obviously not a skilled sculptor, but either I don't have the necessary tools or it's just very hard to sculpt skulls this small. Either way, I needed resemblance to skulls and I think I achieved it. While working on the skulls, I imagined them to be buried underground. In order to achieve that, I'd need extra texture on the sides. So, I covered them up with CA glue baking soda combination, while being careful to keep the skulls intact. Took about 30 minutes for the baking soda CA glue combination to dry, and after that I primed it in black. Then I dry brushed the sections of the sides where soil and ground texture would be. Then painted the skulls and bones with Vallejo light gray. Applied umber wash all over them. Then finally applied black wash to bring up eye sockets, mouths and nostril details. Also applied a diluted black paint on the rest of the surfaces as it looked too reddish to me. Once dried, I decided on the tree's position and drilled a hole for its peg to get into. Then covered the surface with PVA glue and started covering up the gaps in the bottom of the tree. For some reason, I never get this right and find myself covering huge gaps. Well, anyway, there's always some fixing on the go, and I covered all around it with the same foliage and some other homemade dried grass. It looked more interesting this way anyway. Then I covered the entire surface with ground flock. Once it dried enough, I applied more PVA glue, both diluted and not, to add more coarser ground flock to spice it up. And finally I added some tufts of grass here and there because, well, why not? Okay, so I plan to make a shield to be glued right under the tree, as if it was thrown or dropped there. Why a shield, you might ask? Because there will be a fallen builder of this shield in this diorama. So to make a basic shield, I sandwiched 3 2cm long steering sticks, and then rounded the edges with the Dremel sanding bit. I created some crevices, make it look more wooden boardy. Then covered the outside of it with a cardboard strip as if it's the leather or something holding it together or decorating it. I added a round jewelry bit to make it look interesting. And to make it look more interesting, I added 2 arrows stuck on it. Next, I primed it with Vallejo gray surface primer. Then I accidentally formatted the SD card, which had the entire process of painting this. It ended up looking nothing I was hoping for, but still, that's the result. So for the main figure of this vignette, I had this barbarian, or I don't know, a savage warrior figure I was gifted last year. Let's call him the Barbarian. Somehow he reminds me of the male barbarian character from Diablo 3. It's pretty high quality. I thought it was a 3D printed figure, but looking at the seam lines and some minor flashes, I think it's just a plastic figure out of a mold. Anyway, so I get rid of the base. Even though it's plastic, I had a hard time cutting it with utility or hobby knife, so I cut it off with the Dremel. By sanding off the excess plastic, I made sure he stands on his feet. Sanded and cleaned off the sad flashes and mold lines as much as I could. Then, since he is holding a severed head, it made sense to give him a sword in his other hand. To make a sword, I used a toothpick, a fitting jewelry bit for the guard piece, or whatever it's called, I'm not a swordsmith. Sanded off the guard piece with Dremel to make its surface flat so it would stop a parried swing instead of deflecting one towards his lower body. And for the pommel, I used another fitting jewelry bit. The posture he held the sword kinda bothered me, so I bent his arm a bit. Then pegged him as usual. Once it's done, I primed him in gray, although it's hard to notice any difference since the original color is somewhat the same. Then started painting him, starting from the skin sections with Vallejo medium flesh tone paint. Next, I tackled his hair and beard. In order to bring up a wilder image, I chose his hair color to be red. No offense to redheads. It just somehow made more sense to use this color instead of black, brown, gray, or blonde colors. I painted the hair with a mixture of red, cork brown, and some other colors I don't remember now. And painted the beard darker tone of the same color mixture. Because as far as I know, one's beard and hair color doesn't usually match. Also, beard tends to get dirtier than the hair. I highlighted the hair with an orange mix I made. This is by far the most detailed figure I've ever painted. I had to always plan out for the next shade or the next layer of paint on each portion of the figure. Spent an entire night, well, not gonna lie, about 3 hours only on the skin and the hair-beard combination. With a diluted black red paint, I brought out the shadows. For the kilt, I believe, I used a watered-down mixture of black and bronze paints. I guess it's some sort of a chainmail armor piece to cover his lower body swinging down from his waistline. Then I painted his belt with various colors like Vallejo smoke, chocolate brown, flat earth, dark sand, and sometimes some of these mixed. I just wanted to go for a worn down belt kind of look here. After that's painted, again, I don't know what this is, it might have been a cloth fabric, but I treated it as if it's a leather piece. So painted it in dark sand mixed with a bit of a white, and washed it off with chocolate brown color. Applied a wash of smoke color. And then I wasn't happy with the depth of it and applied the same with less water in it. For the fur on his shoulders, I mixed a bit of a medium flesh tone with light gray and painted it all over there. Then added a tiny bit of darker gray and painted it again. Highlighted the edges with a mixture of white and dark sand colors. Then I wanted to add more depth and made a wash with anthracite gray. Painted his wrist guards with chocolate brown. Can't be seen much on the camera, but there are some nice details over there like laces or strings, so I touched over them with dark sand. I wanted the pants something dark but not too blacky, so painted them with Vallejo smoke color. While waiting for them to dry, I painted the boots with chocolate brown. While waiting for them to dry, I painted the first coat of victim's hair. I wanted him to look elderly or well older than the barbarian, so I went for a gray hair. Touched on the pants creases with flat earth. Man, this is so much of paint explanation. Since I record the voice over the actual videos, I have hard time remembering the names of each paint I use. Anyway, so the boots started to look like there are cords or, I don't know, laces holding them together. As if he wrapped a bunch of leather or even maybe cloth over his feet and kept them together with strings, I don't know. Maybe painting them accordingly would look better or more realistic. Then again, who looks or would have looked like this in real life? Anyway, painted these bits with Vallejo orange brown. Then applied watered down smoke color over them. Now onto the gory detail I had been wanting to do so badly. He has a slashed skin detail on his belly, so I painted it as realistic as possible with Vallejo fresh blood paint. And painted blood on the victim's neck and around his mouth as if he coughed up a lot of blood. Applied flesh wash on the skin starting with the hands. I painted the sword with black natural steel mixture. Painted the guard and the pommel with bronze. For some reason I love bronze color so much. Painted the sword over with natural steel again. Touched on the sides with oily steel color just to make things a bit more interesting. And then finally the blood. Didn't want to cover the entire thing with it, but wanted to make sure this reflects the gore in the scene. I almost missed that he had a talisman or something like that, so painted that accessory with bronze as well. Finally applied black wash wherever I saw fit. This really had been the most time consuming and most detailed figure I've ever painted. Took about 10 hours or so in total, spread across 3 to 4 days. To be honest with you, I enjoyed every single minute of it. After that, it was time to get my hands dirty again to create our victim. For this, I again twisted armature wire to make an armature, obviously. Can't really say I'm all that good making figures, or I guess sculpting figures. Trying to make them in small scales make it even harder for me as I'm still learning. But I didn't make the same mistake I did with the tree and covered the armature with foil. And then with the almighty millipods, I failed to create flesh and a body for this guy badly. Before long, I stripped off the millipod and switched to the dust air drying clay. Gave it a fallen on his face posture and covered it up roughly with the clay. Let it dry overnight. Next day I sanded off the excess and prepared it for the next phase of clay work. You can see how terribly amorphous this is. I need to practice my sculpting skills. With the best of my abilities, I tried to bulk up his legs, gave him some boots, a belt. And to hide that hideous back and slack myself away from the armor details I needed to make, I made a cloak leaning down from his back. And just like the shield, I lost the footage for the painting process. But it ended up just fine, depicting a headless body of a noble soldier standing up to a barbarian. With every piece of this vignette done, it's time to put it all together. I start with drilling a pair of holes for the barbarian and glue him in a spot. Next is the lying victim. Then the shield, tossed or thrown away by the tree. And of course the victim's feet and the left arm didn't meet the ground, so I'm filling those gaps with more ground floor and foliage. Finally, I add more spilled blood, or actually gushed blood, on the ground. I first painted the ground with watered down red and black red paint. Then applied the same fresh blood paint over it, close to the neck. Oh my! Like I said, Halloween came early. Thank you for being here and watching this episode. It's been a very fun, entertaining and educating build for me, especially with the figures painting. If you like this, give this video a like, and if you are watching this and haven't subscribed yet, please do so. In the upcoming days, I'll make a couple of tutorial videos apart from my regular video content, so make sure to enable notifications by hitting that bell. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.